Hi, thanks for joining me as we talk in this video about St. Thomas Aquinas' teaching in the Summa Theologica about ghosts. And obviously, St. Thomas Aquinas, the principal ghost that he would have been concerned about is the Holy Ghost, the third person of the Blessed Trinity. But really in this video, since we're approaching Halloween and All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day at the time that I'm recording this, we're talking about the more secular notion of what a ghost is, because people have them outside their homes pretty much all the time in October, and ghouls and goblins and witches and all kinds of creepy stuff. And so what exactly is a ghost, and what did, if anything, St. Thomas Aquinas say about it in the Summa Theologica? Okay, that's what we're going to talk about. And the notion of a ghost, as far as the secular culture goes, would be when there's a death of a person, and then you have the soul or some, animating force of that person that leaves. So you have this separation between the corpse and the soul, and whatever that non-corpse part of it is, that would be the ghost, because it kind of hangs around and it might come and visit people, and it seems a little creepy, right? And of course, in the popular culture, we see depictions of ghosts typically with sheets, because even though a ghost would naturally be invisible, we have to depict it somehow, and sometimes it can be kind of creepy, like this one. They're hanging around graveyards. There are souls that didn't quite depart entirely from the corpse that they left. And so there's a lot of curiosity, and also Hollywood, of course, has taken a lot of interest in corpses and ghosts. I'm just thinking of movies where there is centered around a dead body or a corpse. Stand By Me came out in the 1980s. The whole premise is that some young boys found the dead body of a young boy, and the entire movie had to do with them going back to that place where they found it, and all the intrigue and the mystery surrounding that. More recently, just in the last year, a movie came out where The Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, the book, and the very first scene of the movie had to do with a young boy finding a corpse, and that's the premise of the movie. Whoa, who is this? What happened? And then, of course, Psycho has to do with a corpse or a dead body as well. I don't want to give too much away in case you haven't seen that movie. All right, so the whole idea of somebody dying and that not being the end of the story, because something happens, the soul departs, and then what happens to that soul after it departs, that's what makes the human being very mysterious and very interesting, because we really just naturally don't think that death is the end of the story. Whereas if you came across a dead animal, like a dead bird, most people would not think that there is some bird soul that's still lingering around, or a raccoon, or even a dog for that matter. They just figure it's a dead bird, and you're not going to make a whole movie around a dead bird, because you figure, well, that's the end of the story, right? And there's not that much intriguing about it. So a lot of what St. Thomas Aquinas is going to be concerned about in the Summa, involving ghosts, or what he would call separated souls, has to do with how do they operate, because as he is going to inquire, the way we come to know things here on earth, like this lady in this picture, is through our senses. Okay, we see the dog, we smell the dog, we touch the dog, and that's how we know things. Everything that we've come to know has been through the senses. So Thomas is interested in, well, how does that separated soul know? How does it operate? And then he's also, at the very end of the Summa, going to talk about, well, can those separated souls come back and visit people that are living on earth? And that, of course, would be pretty much the definition of a ghost, because it's coming back and revisiting a person, right? So the first question he asks, and this is all on prima pars, on human nature, is whether the separated soul can understand anything. Okay, because again, it's separated from the body, so how is it going to understand anything? He says the difficulty in solving this question arises from the fact that the soul united to the body can understand only by turning to the phantasms. Okay, that's the image that we have that is derived from something physical. Okay, so there could be a phantasm of a pen only because we've experienced the pen sensibly first, right? As experience shows, because that's how we come to know things. Everything that we've come to know has been through the senses. Did this not proceed from the soul's very nature, but accidentally through its being bound up with the body, as the Platonists said, the difficulty would vanish. Okay, so Plato and his followers thought that the soul and the body were not necessarily a composite, and that the soul actually was much better off without a body. So Thomas is saying here, well, if that's the case, well, then the problem is solved, because the soul would have been better off with the body anyways, and so it's in a better state. And then he says, for in that case, when the body was once removed, the soul would at once return to its nature and would understand intelligible things simply, without turning to the phantasms, as is exemplified in the case of other separate substances. He's talking about angels here. So in Plato's view, the soul would just become an angel, like an angel, and it would kind of knock off this body it's been dragging around here on earth, and it actually now has fulfilled its nature because it doesn't have any body any longer. Thomas doesn't agree with that notion of body-soul relationship. In that case, however, the union of soul and body would not be for the soul's good, for evidently it would understand worse in the body than out of it. But if we admit that the nature of the soul requires it to understand by turning to the phantasms, it will seem, since death does not change its nature, that it can then naturally understand nothing, as the phantasms are wanting to which it may turn. So here he's saying, okay, so if it's natural that a soul and a body are united, well, when the soul leaves the body, then it's not going to be able to know anything. It's just floating around, and it doesn't have any purpose, because it can't function outside the body, right? Then he says, now the soul has one mode of being when in the body and another when apart from it, its nature remaining always the same. But this does not mean that its union with the body is an accidental thing, for on the contrary, such union belongs to its very nature. Okay, that's very important. The soul, therefore, when united to the body consistently with the mode of existence, has a mode of understanding by turning to corporeal phantasms, which are in corporeal organs. Okay, so we use our body to come to know things. But when it is separated from the body, it has a mode of understanding by turning to simply intelligible objects, as is proper to other separate substances. So Thomas is saying, yeah, when the soul is separated from the body, it becomes like an angel. It doesn't become an angel, but its mode of knowing things becomes like an angel, and theirs is all infused. They obviously don't use senses because they don't have any senses. They don't have a body. But our separated soul would be like an angel. But interestingly, the soul and the body are going to reunite again at the end of time, at the general judgment, right? He goes on to ask whether the habit of knowledge here acquired remains in the separated soul. Okay, so all the things that we learn through study or reading, okay, well, does that remain in the separated soul? And he says, yes, it does. And then whether separated souls know what takes place on earth. This is interesting because church fathers have differed on this question, and he goes into a lot of detail about, Augustine said this and Damascene said that, and they didn't agree with each other. But in the end, Thomas says, yeah, the separated souls can know what's going on here on earth, but only because God allows them to, okay? Not through their own power. It's not through their nature, but through their supernatural gift from God. All right, so finally, the big question is, with ghosts and goblins coming and visiting earth, whether the souls who are in heaven or hell are able to go from thence. Okay, so can they leave heaven? Can they leave hell and visit people here on earth? That's what Thomas is talking about. And he says there are two ways of understanding a person to leave hell or heaven. First, that he goes from thence simply so that heaven or hell is no longer his place. And in this way, no one who is finally consigned to hell or heaven can go from thence. Secondly, they may be understood to go forth for a time, and hence we must distinguish what befits them according to the order of nature and what according to the order of divine providence. And so obviously, when somebody is in hell, that's their final state. When somebody's in heaven, that's their final state. Purgatory is a transitional state of somebody who's going to be in heaven eventually, right? So he's saying they can't go permanently from hell to another place or heaven to another place, but maybe for a time they can. All right. Consequently, according to the natural course, the separated souls consigned to their respective abodes are utterly cut off from communication with the living. For according to the course of nature, men living in mortal bodies are not immediately united to separate substances, since their entire knowledge arises from the senses, nor would it be fitting for them to leave their abode for any purpose other than to take part in the affairs of the living. So he's saying there wouldn't be any reason for them to leave heaven or hell unless there was some mission down on earth that they were trying to accomplish, right? Nevertheless, according to the disposition of divine providence, separated souls sometimes come forth from their abode and appear to men, as Augustine relates of the martyr Felix, who appeared visibly to the people of Nola when they were besieged by the barbarians. It is also credible that this may occur sometimes to the damned, and that for man's instruction and intimidation they be permitted to appear to the living, or again in order to seek our suffrages, as those who are detained in purgatory, as evidenced by the many instances of related in the fourth book of the Dialogues. All right, so Thomas is saying here, yes, souls can leave heaven and come to earth. So are there ghosts? Yes, according to St. Thomas Aquinas. Can some soul leave hell and come to earth? Yes, he's saying that that's also possible, and also from purgatory, because they may come here and try to get us to pray for them because they want to get out of purgatory, right? All right, the last slide says, there is, however, this difference between the saints and the damned, that the saints can appear when they will to the living, but not the damned. For even as the saints, while living in the flesh, are able by the gifts of gratuitous grace to heal and work wonders, which can only be done miraculously by the divine power, and cannot be done by those who lack this gift, so it is not unfitting for the souls of the saints to be endowed with a power in virtue of their glories, so that they are able to appear wondrously to the living when they will, while others are unable to do so until they be sometimes permitted. So there's more freedom among the blessed to go when they want to go, okay? So if you feel a presence of your grandmother who died and she was a very holy woman, well, Thomas is saying, yeah, it might be possible. She might come back, or somebody in purgatory might come back and request prayers, but with the damned, it's rare and it's only with the permission of God. So they don't have just a ability to kind of go whenever they want. All right, so in summary, what is a ghost? Well, a ghost, according to St. Thomas Aquinas, other than the Holy Ghost, is a separated soul. And can they come to know things outside of the body? Yes, in a way similar to the angels. And do they ever possibly visit people on earth? And Thomas says the answer to that would also be yes. Sometimes they can. In fact, the holy souls in heaven can pretty much do that whenever they want. Okay? All right, thanks for watching. God bless you.